It's no secret that the manual transmission in both the Jeep JL Wrangler and the JT Gladiator are prone to some problems with the clutch. Although it's somewhat rare, these problems include overheating from slippage all the way up to the point of actually fracturing and in some rare cases actually fragmenting. Some of y'all maybe remember the manual transmission review that I did a couple years ago when we first got the Jeep Gladiator. Well, fortunately, we have over 60,000 miles on this Jeep and absolutely no problems with the clutch and no problems with the vehicle at all. It's performed flawlessly and brought us to some really awesome places. But the issue at hand, the manual transmission clutch typically lasts around 50 to 100,000 miles. And now that we have over 60,000 miles on the clock, we're definitely in the ballpark range for considering a replacement, or in our case, an upgrade. And not just any upgrade. This new clutch system is going to solve all the shortcomings of the factory clutch and then some. So if you've been considering a clutch upgrade for your manual JL or JT, stay tuned. This one's for you. Hey, welcome back to the Gator Overland Channel. I'm John, and today we're coming to you from just outside the facilities of Advanced Clutch Technology, or ACT, located just north of Los Angeles in beautiful Lancaster, California. If you're unfamiliar with ACT, they are a leading brand in the world of motorsports. They specialize in delivering the highest performing driveline components in the automotive industry. So why are we here? Well, recently ACT developed an aftermarket clutch system specifically for the JL JT platform that is not only stronger than the factory clutch, it solves the shortcomings of the factory clutch as well. ACT reached out to us to see what we thought about our factory clutch and if we'd be interested in doing a video collaboration with them to help spread the word. Well, I couldn't be more grateful or excited about this opportunity, and y'all get to come along too. Not only are they installing the aftermarket clutch in our Jeep Gladiator, we're going to be able to tour the facility, meet the folks that make ACT what it is, and we're going to learn about why this clutch is going to be an all-around game changer for the JL JT platform. Now, I'll be honest, there are some unhappy folks with the performance of the factory clutch, but despite that, I haven't found the performance of mine to be subpar, even after 60,000 miles. And that's coming from someone who has over 20 years experience with a manual transmission. So we have about 1,700 miles back home to Texas, and that will give us plenty of time between highway, a little bit of off-roading, and some camping in the mix to get a good feel and evaluation. And when we get back home, I'm going to give a full line, tell you what I think about their clutch. And if it's everything they say that it's everything that they say that it is, I'm really looking forward to the feel of their new ProMass Flywheel. It's gonna definitely be a treat on the road, and definitely when we're going up those steep inclines. So rather than stalling anymore, let's go check these guys out. As soon as we entered the ACT lobby, we were immediately greeted by CEO Dirk Starksen and his son Andrew, who's actually one of the mechanical engineers at ACT. These guys didn't waste any time. They immediately handed me my keys and a radio and said, let's go for a test drive. We have a hill in the backyard we want you to climb, and we want you to tell us everything you think about this clutch. I'll go more over that experience here in just a minute when we do the evaluation, but it was such a cool experience to go directly into driving both on and off-road before going any further. Once we got back to the shop, he gave me a full rundown on the construction of the clutch system. There is actually a full JL JT specific clutch series on their YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the description below. From there, he gave me the full process from beginning to end of how a clutch is developed, the machining, the tooling, the QC tests, to guarantee that what you get in the box at your house is professional grade, ready to cross the finish line. So from here, I'm going to let Dirk take it away and explain a little bit more of how they developed this clutch.
I'm Dirk Starksen, President of Advanced Clutch Technology, and I'd like to explain how we developed our clutch for the Gladiator JT and the Wrangler JL. They share the same parts. And the factory clutch parts are what you see on your right here. Now this is an 8.5-inch twin disc on a dual mass flywheel with a self-adjusting pressure plate. It's overly complicated, it's very expensive, and we found that there's a lot of problems and a lot of limitations with it. So we decided we're not even going to try and modify that or anything. But when we looked at the predecessor of the JK, we actually kind of liked that design and what we've done with it. Now this is the factory unit here. It's actually out of my Jeep. And when we developed the clutch for the JK, we beefed it up. So it has increased clamp load, increased surface area because we make our own casting for it. It's an 11-inch clutch with just a conventional flywheel and spring center disc. And then we have our own disc for it that is much stronger and has steel back lining so they can't blow off if you do something wrong. And what we sought to do is to find out, can we make this work in the JL? Now we know that this little tiny stock clutch requires very little travel to operate compared to an 11-inch big clutch like this. So we had to find some efficiency somewhere. This is the diaphragm that we have for the JK. And we thought, well, how can we save some travel? Now, for testing, we threw our JK unit into the JL, and sure enough, it's disengaging down by the floor. So we knew we had to save some travel, like I said, and we came up with a different diaphragm spring. And this diaphragm spring has less flex in the fingers, and that's where you waste a lot of travel when operating the clutch. So we put ribs in it, we've narrowed down the slots, we've increased the diameter that the bearing pushes on, and all of that made it more efficient. And we have a reduction in the required travel by about 20%, which is perfect to go into the JL and JT. That's how we came up with our clutch for those. Now, in order to make that work, obviously you need a flywheel. Well, we decided we're going to offer two different weights. We have what we call our street mass, that's this flywheel here, and it's about a 19% increase in inertia over the factory clutch and flywheel. But it's basically about the same as the stock JK. And then we said, well, we want to increase the inertia as well and have that available, so we have our Pro Mass flywheel, which adds a lot more material. I mean, it is really thick. And I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but that's the difference in the back of it. Pro Mass is more like a 50% increase in inertia, which works out really well. I prefer this really on all of the later Jeeps, but some people, maybe you don't want to have that much inertia, but for those that are towing or have, real heavy vehicle, big tires or things like that, I would definitely recommend the Pro Mass. And this is the pressure plate for the JL and JT. So it'll hold 479 foot-pounds of torque, and uses this factory operating system, so you don't have to change anything. And of course, we provide the bolts, the bearing, the alignment tool, everything to make it, for the install. And it performs really well, and you're not going to have any problems with durability for sure, because you've got a lot of heat capacity and a lot of torque capacity.
All right, clutch evaluation time. It's been just over a month and over 5,000 miles since we had the ACT clutch upgrade done to our Jeep Gladiator, and all I can say is, simply put, I've loved every shift, every mile, every day. And that's not fanboying, that's me, honest opinion. There is that much room for improvement over the stock clutch, and this has nailed it. You remember earlier I said I'd get back to our meeting situation when we first walked into ACT? Literally walked in and say, hey, how you doing? Dirk handed me the keys and a radio and said, I have a hill in my backyard and we're gonna go for a test drive, and I want you to tell me everything you think about this clutch. Well, I'm thinking, I'm Southeast Texan, our hills are basically what overpasses are made out of. So I'm thinking, all right, this is in his backyard. Well, he brought me to just shy of a mountain and pulled up to it, and he said, put it in 4-low, 3rd gear, and we're gonna go up it, see if you can stall it. Well, 3rd gear is easy to start off, especially with the 4-to-1 transfer case in the Rubicon, but it went up at like choo-choo train, just choo-choo-choo-choo. And as we continued going on, it flatted off a little bit and then would come into about an 18. And he said, go ahead and shift it into 4th gear, see if you can stall it. Shift it into 5th gear. I did put it into 5th gear, and I got to some particular situation where it was starting to show signs of a little bit of load, like tick, 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 tick. So, rather than stall it out, I just accepted it what it was, keep it in 4th gear or 3rd gear. But then I thought the worst case scenarios that I've ever had whenever I've been out wheeling in a convoy of friends were constantly on an incline, and being a manual transmission, someone stops up ahead, makes the whole convoy stop, and you're stuck on a 10 to 15 or even higher elevation, and now you got to get started from a dead stop, 37s, awkward positions, sometimes off camber, and then you got to go and continue. Well, I tested it out, went ahead, stopped in the middle of an incline, started it off in 1st gear, and I mean, literally coming off the clutch, it rides over the brake and pushes on. I was never able to do that in this, even in 4-low on certain inclines. Super impressive. Nothing better than going straight from an airport to where your vehicle is, hopping in, doing an on-road test, and then going immediately off-road, and then seeing the beautiful state or town of Lancaster from above. It was such a cool experience, and I mean, give it to them. They are great folks over there at ACT. allowing this to happen, and I couldn't be more grateful for it. Now, as far as the experience on the road, of course, there was about 10 miles that we drove in between there. Immediately after I pulled out of the parking lot, 10 feet after pulling out of the parking lot, headed to the big mountain, it was immediate change. There was, I mean, I mic'd over and said, this is immediately different from what the original experience is. And what I mean by that, the actual clutch pedal itself is a whole lot firmer. Before it was only like maybe 10 pounds and about 4 pounds give back. Now it's at a constant 15 pounds down and 15 pounds back up, which gives you the consistency of knowing when it is engaged and disengaged, whereas before it was really easy to push down, which is convenient, and then it was kind of floppy coming up. So it kind of engaged and disengaged somewhere in that between 25 and 30% going both ways. Well, now it's a consistent, and whenever it starts to engage, you feel it. It is whoop, and it took a little bit of a learning curve because I was so used to it being sloppy and kind of almost having to rev to catch it. That's the new thing about this. With the new ProMass flywheel in there, I've noticed that as it starts to generate speed on the engine, when you go to disengage the clutch, push the pedal in, it holds the rev a little bit longer. Before it would just drop out and you had to almost push the throttle in to make it match on the next gear. And I did kind of explain that on my first video, like 3 years ago, saying that I like the way that it meshed. Throw that in the garbage. The way that this goes, it holds over like this transmission should have performed this way, especially with the bigger tires. It has a little bit more drag, and whenever I'm pushing in that clutch, the fact that the engine's staying higher means there's less rev that I have to give back to go into the next gear, especially when you're getting up to like 3,000 RPM, maybe you're getting up onto the interstate, you're on an incline, you're pushing in, you got drag, that engine's still going, and then you put into the next gear, and it's such a beautiful mesh. I couldn't be happier with that state. So as I've mentioned, we've gone 5,000 miles now. So the trip back to Texas from California ended up being about 2,300 miles. We stopped and did a little fun in Newport, put my baby in the water of the Pacific Ocean. She's 8 months old, and it was just a good little trip for us to get out. But then we went through Joshua Tree on the way back, and then we took a little detour when we got to New Mexico so I could go up into the mountains and get an idea of what mountain road passes going up and down, up and down. We went through the Lincoln National Forest and started in about Alamogordo, and it put us out close to Texas near Hobbs, New Mexico. And that was an incline of about 4,000 feet with a few grades in between. And I mean, this thing just chugs along. What I've noticed mainly is that I don't find myself having to get out of the gear and drop down as much as I would have, whereas I'm trying to find basically the proper RPMs. This holds, and the extra inertia going through on the flywheel maintains the gear. It's awesome. I can't say it enough, but as we make it back 2 weeks later, we had a trip scheduled to go to Big Bend National Park, which is in the very west of Texas. So literally drove all the way past Big Bend to my home. My home, basically, distance-wise, it's further from my house to El Paso than it is from El Paso to California, where we came from. So we literally went all the way back across the state. If you ever have the opportunity to go to Big Bend, I highly recommend it. It's some of the best wheeling I've done. Just do it in months in R, the end in R, and no later than May, because it was hot. Despite the heat, we made the best of it, but it is more or less a combed, graded trails throughout the most part, but there are some actual Jeep Badge of Honor trails like Black Gap, Old Ower Road, and things like that. So I did get to put this into 4 low situations and actually manage this. I mean, it is such a great experience now whenever it comes down to off-road wheeling that it's just unmatched. It's the way that the transmission should have come, even if you compare it to other vehicles who may have a clutch upgrade that they have out there now. I expect them to perform similar to the same, but the added inertia, it carries through. A lot of Big Bend is 45 miles per hour, so you don't find yourself going very fast, and a lot of the roads, you don't go much more than 20. So I found that I did most of Big Bend in second gear, 2 high, sometimes 4 high, just if I needed to disconnect or whatnot to go through things. But being able to maintain 1 gear in a manual transmission is bliss. It might as well have an automatic. If I ever got slow enough to where it would put along second gear, it was still holding over with the inertia, and I was able to get back up, maybe periodically shifting over into third. Third's about 30 on some graded trails and even aired down. If you want to keep your teeth in your head, you keep it about 20 miles per hour. But the experience of going through there and all the grades between, once you get into West Texas, it's pretty much high, low, and even loaded down, I get between 16 and 18 miles per gallon, and it stayed consistent with this clutch upgrade. And I mean, for the most part, I can say the off-road experience has definitely excelled. The on-road experience, I mean, especially when we were going through California, literally one side of LA to the other, I had about 2.5 hours of traffic. If you have a manual transmission and you do traffic, you don't do a manual transmission. But this is fine because I was able to put it in either first or second, and there's enough inertia to where I pretty much could just coast behind and never actually have to stop. Of course, it was just slowly moving, but it was a peace of mind knowing that I'm not in the same situation where I was, just constantly in and out, in and out, in and out. I was able to just let the vehicle do itself, even if I was riding up against the brakes, which you probably want to do all the time, but you know, it's been great. Now, as far as some things that I want to cover that I asked Dirk as far as installation goes, what do you do when you actually bring this into a dealership for maintenance or anything like that? Well, as far as that goes, you definitely let them know that you've had the clutch upgrade or a clutch, aftermarket clutch put in. That way they know not to do any recall research on it or anything like that. Now, other things as far as doesn't require a computer installation, it doesn't require anything to be replaced. Basically, it's the clutch system comes out, clutch system goes in. There's no replacement of any aftermarket products on the slave cylinder, any of the hydraulics. It is all designed to work specifically with the Jeep equipment, which is great because if anything's to fail and it is the clutch, talk to ACT. If anything outside of that, talk to Jeep, and it's that simple. I guess a few other things. Is it DIY friendly? Yes, you can do this installation with simple hand tools. The hardest part that they said is actually some bolts on the top. There's some studs that are actually a little bit too long for what they're actually required to do. And it's just really hard to get to when you're first removing it off. But other than that, with simple hand tools, you could do this in your driveway. They said they do think that it is best that you have the ability to remove the transmission and the transfer case at the same time. But as far as that goes, if you have mechanical ability, you can do this in your driveway. Another question that I had asked Dirk was if you're planning to have a shop do it, what is the amount of hours that should be kind of flagged for it? And he said 5.5 to 6 hours at a general shop should be able to get it done. But you know, if you go to a dealership, you know, they might push it back and forth a little bit, but 5.5 and 6 hours is about what you should expect for labor time for this install. There is a 479 foot-pound clutch, and there's also a 613 foot-pound clutch for those of you who may want to put a little boost on your 3.6. I did ask if it's Hemi rated. He said he didn't want to endorse that it was, but if there was any adapters that could be and the proper testing was to happen, then maybe it would be something he could endorse. But 613 foot-pounds is 613 foot-pounds regardless of what you're putting in front of it. It's just a matter of getting it all bolted up together. So that could be something that is in the future, but definitely for boosted engines, they have an option. 479 foot-pounds, that is, well, if you watch any of their video series that I mentioned on YouTube, they go through the whole clamp load and everything like that, and they worked the factory one down to about 267 or 270 foot-pounds of margin. This is a 260 foot-pound engine. That doesn't leave very much for a load overage, or I guess backup for you. As soon as you put a load, trailer, or anything like that, your clutch is already at its max capacity. So there are a few things that I do want to point out that they're not negatives by any means, but they are some things that they are different from when they were at stock. The first one is going to be a little bit of chatter in neutral. This is very common with single mass clutch styles, and if there was a scale of 1 to 5, this one's a 1. It just means I can hear it. The dual mass has a self-regulating clutch set, and it has a little bit less noise as far as sitting in neutral. Now, there are some BMWs out there where it sounds like you have a box of marbles literally going on, and that would be a 5. This one would be a 1. 2 would be the clutch surface whenever they're brand new, and this is very common for most any clutch that's being installed. The surfaces are not exactly flat, so whenever they actually mesh and put pressure up, whenever you're just sly of pulling the clutch into engagement, there can be a little bit of a shudder. That is something that will wear in future to go away and will actually become smooth. But I've only noticed this in situations where I have not actually applied throttle and I'm just using the vehicle's momentum of engine, basically idle, to put the clutch in. And that's only whenever I'm just kind of shy of going into it. If I put it into full engagement, it's not a problem. Or if I give it a little bit of throttle, that vibration or that shudder goes away immediately. And the third thing is it sounds different. And I don't know if it's just because the additional inertia has made the engine perform a little bit different as far as the way that it's revolution. I even asked Dirk, I was like, did you do anything to my exhaust? Because it no longer sounds like a hairdryer. It kind of has a little sportier sound. So I don't know what to say about that, but that's my theory, is that it has a little bit different sound to it because of the extra inertia and what's going on. So one thing that they actually did to this, they checked it at 3 different intervals. So basically they pulled my transmission 3 different times so they could get an evaluation for their data of how these things perform, especially after 62,000 miles. At the time, I'm now at 67,000 miles. And they did it with lube. They pulled it away, put the new one on without lube, put the new one on with lube, and did a full graph, a chart, and seeing how much difference this thing performed. And it literally just went straight off the chart. It's so impressive with the amount of work that they went into doing this. And that just shows the amount of work that they're willing to do for you as the customer, me as the driver. And I couldn't be happier with the way this is set up. It's been an absolute joy to drive. I didn't not enjoy it before, but I enjoy the heck out of it now, that's for sure. Man, that's it. Well, that about wraps things up. If you're one of the many thousands of manual JL JT owners that's looking for enhanced manual transmission performance or even peace of mind over the factory clutch, or maybe you're even one of the few that has actually experienced the factory clutch failure and you found this video informative or helpful in making your decision to go with an ACT clutch for your clutch upgrade, go ahead, give us a big thumbs up, let us know how we're doing, and definitely share. Folks need to know that there is an aftermarket solution to fix the faulty factory clutch. For a heads up on any future installs or adventures, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. You can follow us along our journey. Don't forget to check the description below for links to the ACT website for products, as well as links to their YouTube channel so you can see the full description of all the clutch build and everything, all the way up to the full installation. And there's going to be contact information in case you need to get a hold of ACT for your application or any questions for me. And I want to just take a second to say thanks to the full ACT family. Dirk, Andrew, that was such a great experience, not just for the vehicle in the past 5,000 miles, but for my family alone, and the confidence to go out there, have everything handled, and here I am today explaining your product and letting people know about it. It's been such a great experience. I also want to give a shout out to Tempest Logics. They made sure that my truck got safely from Texas to California unscathed, no issues. They were informative and communicative all the way from the time of before pickup all the way to delivery. It was a great experience. And as far as that goes, remember, we at Gator Overland encourage each and every one of you to take a daily moment to unplug and reconnect with the outdoors, even if it's just for a few minutes. Have fun, keep it safe, and just go. Thanks, y'all.